deal we make with you. We give you these pens to take home if you fill out the survey. And if you don't fill out the survey, you have to leave. So we get very few pens back, so it's worthwhile trade-off. Just everybody take your seat and we'll get started. Our special guest from Pennsylvania has to go back to Pennsylvania very shortly, and we really wanted you to hear from him directly. Paul Heimel is in his second term as a member of the Board of Commissioners in Potter County, which is really in the heart of the north-central Pennsylvania wilds, probably one of the most rural and least populous counties in the state. Former journalist and corporate communications executive, he got involved in shale gas drilling issues, traveling to Texas and various communities to sort of check the impact of the growth of the shale gas production. His background as an investigative journalist allows him to be that much more objective, and as well as balancing being a corporate executive and being a good potential professional communicator. He's Potter County's person on important issues that really impact on the county. And he's come to join us today from Potter County to talk about the Pennsylvania experience and what his observations are. And he's an advocate for the truth and the facts. And he's not an advocate for one side or the other, but he's going to tell you what the Pennsylvania experience is like. And I'm pleased to welcome Commissioner Paul Heimel.
Thank you, my Penn State brother. That Mike syndrome. Okay, we're there. My Penn State brother, John, here mentioned the word transformative, and you may see me at the end of the table pushing buttons furiously. Just before I stepped in the room this morning, I got an invitation to go to a Mitt Romney event, which is taking place in Bradford County, Pennsylvania, and he is going to emphasize energy independence and the role that shale gas can play from an international standpoint of bolstering our domestic energy independence. So a very timely program. I'm wondering if you'll be on the evening news tonight. I'm going to try and get as close to the cameras as I can. Call my wife and say, watch CBS News 6:30. I've labeled my presentation the good, the bad, and the ugly. We're going to take a look at roughly a dozen aspects of shale gas drilling and find something about each of them that's good, or bad, or downright ugly. Now sometimes, admittedly, that is going to be a stretch. After all, it's hard to find too much that's ugly about people finally having money in their bank account. Nor is there anything I can think of that's too good to say about muddy, crater-filled roads. But for the sake of the theme that Clint Eastwood and I have come up with here, we're going to try to at least have a small portion of good, bad, and ugly. There certainly is a whole lot more good than there is bad and ugly in my own editorial viewpoint. I will get to that toward the end of my presentation. Let's see if I know how to run this thing. There we go. I don't know, looking at the age of the crowd, perhaps some of you had that album up on the upper left. That's the Moody Blues, A Question of Balance, which really kind of fits this. The good, bad, ugly format's one way we might avoid falling into the trap that has snared so many people already. Perhaps you know some of them. Maybe you have some in your own circle of friends or in your family. I know I do. I have people that don't speak to me anymore because of my insistence on neutrality on this issue, because they're so passionate. That certainly leans toward the opponents more than the proponents. But I've literally lost friendships over this issue because I just do not succumb to half-truths and scare tactics, I guess you could say. So many have rushed to judgment. They've already taken sides, and in effect, they've painted themselves into a corner. I've seen far too many who, by their behavior, are sending the message, don't confuse me with facts. But I have the freedom of neutrality and objectivity. I've not leased any mineral rights, nor do I own any. I'm not a scientist. I don't hold a candle to a lot of the technical information very informative that we've heard earlier this morning. I'm certainly not an energy expert. I am a passionate brook trout fisherman, and I would hate to see the pure headwater streams where I live fouled to even the slightest degree. Conversely, as a county commissioner, I know that economic development ranks very near the top of my constituents' priority list, so I made that a high priority myself. I sought to understand shale gas with the gritty determination of a journalist who's learned from experience not to accept too much at face value. Now comes the hard part of crunching about a 3-year ongoing study that's included a research trip to Texas, climbing up and down on rigs, and God knows how many seminars, webinars, conferences, down into about a half hour. Much of what I'm going to report is a result of a questionnaire that I circulated to colleagues in the Pennsylvania counties where drilling is taking place. Our county, Potter County, is a little bit to the west of the area that's where there's such a frenzy. We've only been modestly affected, but many that I've interviewed, a lot of the information from my summary here comes from the counties where it's a lot more active. I'm also borrowing a little from Penn State professor Dr. Tim Kelsey. He's a rural economist. He's been studying this even more intensely than I have, and I've been given a pretty good run. After the good, bad, and ugly, I will share just a couple personal observations. Every day that goes by, I learn more. I've learned more this morning just from listening. And frankly, my opinions change, and they change often. You'll see that studying this issue is a very humbling experience. That's Dr. Kelsey, by the way. I want to give him his due up on the upper right. He's really one of the nation's foremost authorities on the big picture, and especially on the economics. Without a doubt, the industry holds vast opportunities for revival of our older and declining communities. We're talking about jobs, all kinds of related businesses, mineral rights leasing, rapid expansion of supply and service companies. Northern Pennsylvania has been mired in an economic recession for more than a quarter century. And as you saw from the film strip and heard earlier, shale gas is saving mom and pop businesses, farms, filling stations, restaurants, motels, car dealers, real estate companies, rental property owners, and more. It's even resurrected a dying rail industry in some areas. I came on Route 6, started east, headed up 287 north near Wellsboro. That little Tioga Central train that I'd seen 4 or 5 cars on 2 years ago, I lost count of the cars. I went for a good 10 miles with nothing but rail cars on the right side of the road. A lot of them were hauling sand. What kind of money are we talking about? Well, Chesapeake Energy has paid more than $1 billion in lease and royalty payments in Bradford County alone. Dr. Kelsey's identified 3 distinct phases of shale gas development. In the first, the development phase, the job creation and the economic impact rises quickly to its peak. Now, he's looking at a 30-year pattern, so quickly can mean 2 or 3 years. When you look at what's happened to the price of natural gas, falling from more than $10 per 1,000 cubic feet to something like $2.20 the last I looked, you can see how hard it is to make predictions about the timetable. Right now, in a lot of the areas where I've been doing my studies, the wells have been drilled, it's capped, they're waiting for the pipelines to come in, waiting for the supply network to set up, and waiting for the price to go up. And then look out. Typically, it starts with landmen invading the area, then property owners get their bonus payments, well pads and access roads are built, pipelines constructed, and the well is drilled, fracked, and then either capped or brought online. In the production phase, the number of jobs is greatly reduced, and payments to mineral rights holders are, of course, based on royalties. As the years go by, there may be re-drilling and re-fracking of wells that came in during the first phase. The same bores may be used to drill down into other gas-bearing shale formations. We're seeing a lot of interest in the Utica Shale in our part of Pennsylvania and stretching over into Ohio especially. And with the wet gas and different characteristics, that's where a lot of the emphasis is right now. A lot of the rigs have been pulled up from north central and northeastern and moved over to the western part of Pennsylvania and into Ohio. But it's a changing industry. That's the one thing that's constant, is it will always change. Lastly comes the reclamation phase, which of course has the least economic impact. Getting now to the bad. This boom and bust cycle can leave some businesses and institutions hanging if they base their major decisions on the economics that are in play during the first phase. Another negative aspect has been declining property values and quality of life in areas where there are compressor stations, forest clearing, traffic, and other impacts. The industry still has a very spatial nature in some ways. The speakers earlier alluded to the fact that from a single pad you can drill multiple wells, and that has reduced the footprint. But there are other things such as staging areas, worker housing, pipe, sand, and other storage, maintenance facilities, water withdrawal and storage, and more. A lot of that is temporary, though, during the initial stage. But all this can change the character of a neighborhood or a community. Higher costs of goods and services have stressed or driven away those who are not on the getting side. And we're also seeing increased pressure on some community resources. Who's bearing the costs and what are those costs? Well, we're just getting our hands around that in Pennsylvania as far as government costs, social services and such. It's still being studied. We did get the impact fee passed, as you may know from Pennsylvania Act 13, sort of in lieu of any kind of a severance tax. We instead imposed an impact fee, so some of that money will come back to the communities that are being affected. Moving into ugly, while some people's relationships have changed as a result of the new distribution of wealth. Those who are suddenly the haves may flaunt their wealth, and some of the have-nots are envious, or they may feel a sense of entitlement to other people's newfound wealth. Shale gas has created a broad cross-section of employment opportunities, unprecedented in modern history. My son got a degree, engineering degree from the University of Pittsburgh, signed on with Schlumberger about 2 years ago. That's a field services company. I think it's the biggest in the world, Halliburton and Schlumberger right up there. He never thought he'd ever want to come back to Potter County. And now with shale gas on the horizon, what he's seen in Bradford and Tioga counties and others, he's rethinking that. He's thinking he can have it all. He loves to hunt, fish, and ride his four-wheeler, and he thinks he might even be able to make a living and still enjoy those kind of activities. So there's a personal, very close to home story. Jobless rates have tumbled in many counties, and the industry is still in what Dr. Kelsey describes as that first stage. Bradford County report came out, I think, a week or two ago. It now has the lowest unemployment rate in the state of Pennsylvania. I think it's about 5.1. Most recently comes word that the Royal Dutch Shell cracker plant could create thousands of new jobs coming to southwestern Pennsylvania. It's a game changer, and 6 months ago, who knew? But it's not so great if you're running a business that competes against these deep-pocketed employers. Simply put, they've been cherry-picking competent people from private and public employers. Our county government has lost some excellent employees to the beckoning call of higher paychecks. Small local legacy businesses that have been the foundation of the economy for decades are finding it hard to compete. If you're running a car repair shop in Towanda, for instance, try to find a mechanic who's going to work for you when he can make triple the salary working somewhere else. As far as ugly, I'd say many people are resentful, some people are resentful that companies are bringing in workers from other states. But it's a myth that all those jobs are going to workers from other states. They're not. A majority of them are going to local folks. If they'll just get the training, or if they can pass the P test and they're willing to work hard, that's actually a big problem. They're uncomfortable with some of the culture clashes. Occasionally there's the bar fight or the pickup truck flyby on a bumpy country road at 3 a.m. But boys will be boys. And the locals aren't used to a lot of 10-gallon hats. And my favorite, the Lone Star beer ads on the billboards of Pennsylvania. I've never had Lone Star beer. A seasoned educator I know marvels at the newfound sense of stewardship that he is seeing in people who didn't used to give a damn about the environment. The shale gas boom has been sort of a wake-up call. And I look at that as a good, as long as the people that are speaking are responsible and know what they're talking about. In Potter County, we're especially proud of our watershed coalition. We brought together all 10 public water suppliers in our county, people who didn't even know each other 6 months ago. They've mapped out source water protection areas in an effort to assure that anyone involved with earth disturbance or other threatening behavior to public water supplies will take special precautions and not foul our water sources. They've teamed up with things like bulk purchasing, political activism, public education, and other common interests. Potter County's model is now being studied by the EPA, and it has even been noticed by Congress as an example for the rest of the nation. And that's just public drinking water sources. We've also formed teams of volunteer stream and river watchers, known as the water dogs, to track any changes in conditions of those waters that could be attributed to industrial activity upstream. This is not targeted at the gas industry per se, but we do know it never would have come about if not for some of the concerns that were raised by people about gas drilling's impact. Now, in terms of long-term impact on the environment, the jury is still out. The federal study of fracking may be revealing. You do worry about political influences rather than science and facts. So we'll have to wait a while until that study's done. There does seem to be a consensus. This is probably the most important line that I put in my presentation. There does seem to be a consensus that if the regulations are strong and if compliance is guaranteed, we can do this right. Some public water suppliers have had to place restrictions on water use due to diminished supplies, and there are occasional reports of contamination, not from fracking, but still traced to gas drilling. Forest fragmentation is rising, and its impact on wildlife and recreation continues to be studied. The dialogue continues as to whether stricter air emission or noise controls are needed. For ugly, I have one word, Dimmick. In that tiny northeastern Pennsylvania settlement, the operator messed up big time with well casing, unleashing pollution that affected some private water supplies. This has been the rallying cry for the anti-crowd, and not without some merit. However, some people in that fight are not inclined, again, to let a few facts get in the way of a good misimpression or an exaggeration. The problems in Dimmick were not related to hydrofracturing. They were related to a crappy job of well casing. It should have never happened, and any responsible operator will tell you that, and believe me, they let the company that did that know about it too. There are reports of gas drillers actually building paved roads out to remote sections of forest and pasture land. That was unimaginable only a couple of years ago. Still, looking at the big picture, most of the existing roads and bridges were not constructed to accommodate that volume of traffic and recurring weight. At the same time, the pothole, riddled, and mud-filled roads put far greater wear and tear on residents' vehicles. Highway safety is a concern when you put big, heavy trucks, hundreds of them at times, on lonely country roads where school bus routes have operated for decades and people are used to a certain pace of traffic. Well, those results can be uncomfortable at best. But I want to emphasize, this is during the early stage. This is in the developmental stage when there's all that flurry of activity. As far as ugly, I'd say that some fly-by-nighters just assume the risk of running overweight and oversized vehicles, and if they get caught, they'll pay the fines. But the vast majority of companies are responsible and image conscious. They do a good job of policing their own ranks. But with 30 stages or so involved in drilling a well, about 300 workers from a dozen or more subcontractors involved at the peak, it's easy for some things to slip through the cracks. There's also countless tales of traffic snarls and congestion that can try residents' patience and have even led to vandalism or the occasional incident of road rage. We're seeing many new educational offerings and partnerships for technical training. At long last, students can see a promising career track. I talk about my son, a bona fide industry on the horizon. I don't remember that in my lifetime. I'm 57 years old. And it's not just roughnecks, rig hands, or truck drivers. I went up on a rig in the state forest land in southern Potter County about a year ago, and they took me down into this trailer that had all these satellite dishes on it. They said, here, you'll get a kick out of this. We open up the door. It's really hot in the summer. The guy's got the air conditioner cranked up. Look in there, he's got his cut-off jeans, t-shirt, couple Pepsi cans, potato chip bags, music blaring. The guy's having a ball, it's like a party or something. They said, we want to introduce you to John Doe here, our geologist. So he says, yeah, check this out. There's a guy's coming down off the rig. He's got a little sampling of some cuttings, because they just hit about 2 miles down for this Marcellus well. And they're constantly checking the constituency of the formation down there. And his job is to take these samplings, stick them under his microscope, analyze them, sends a report on the analysis up onto the rig, because it affects things like the direction of the drilling and I guess the pressure, the intensity. I'm not going to say I really understand the industry. He's having a blast. He says, well, actually there's 3 of us. We're running 24 hours right now. And of course we'll be on for about 14 days, and I've got 2 weeks off. I'm going to go back to Texas and go hunting, just hang around and count my money. So right there's, 3 jobs in that trailer right there for professional geologists, and 3+ jobs because they rotate out when they're running. So that was pretty eye-opening. With the unpredictable influx and export of gas workers' families, our public school administrators are having a hard time determining how to plan, whether that's for building construction, curriculum, staffing, school finances. And if you expect to land a job in the gas industry, there's a very good chance you're going to have to be mobile. That can be pretty disruptive to family life and the institutions that rely on the protective, reliable members of the society actually being in the community. There are some inevitable ethnic and cultural challenges. For instance, one special needs student or a single student who doesn't speak English, at least in Pennsylvania, can trigger the hiring of personnel dedicated solely to addressing those needs. Okay, now who can tell me what the phrase means, the last sentence? Anybody know Spanish? Well, it's pretty much, my understanding, Spanish for what did you say? But one of my commissioner friends in Bradford said that's probably the most often asked question in Bradford County. What did you say? There's some cultural issues, especially in the restaurants. A lot of them are learning Spanish. On to housing, shale gas has definitely been a boon for the real estate brokers, rental property owners, and builders. But the traditional housing market has become extremely tight. Our rents that were once $400 a month are now up around $1,000 in some areas. Low-income renters are getting priced out of the market. There's been a rise in homelessness. And then you ask yourself, how much should a developer go all in? Now, the gas industry's downturn that started almost a year ago has some of them nervous about getting so excited when things were ramping up in 2009. They made some significant investments. For ugly, I'll go to a conversation I had with a convenience store attendant in Tioga County, Pennsylvania. And she bemoaned the fact that a handful of people she knows were making a lot of money off the gas boom. That she was earning minimum wage at the mini mart, and then her landlord tripled her rent, which she couldn't afford, so she moved back home. She says, I ended up back with mom and dad. And if you think that's easy for a 28-year-old girl who likes to have a good time once in a while, think again. Just briefly on land use planning, one thing that I look at as a good is that citizen interest in local government is increasing. We're getting new faces, new viewpoints, new people with different types of education on our public agencies and organizations, and I see that as a good thing. And a lot of it is because they're drawn by their concern for this industry, either pro or con. They want to encourage the economic potential of it, and they have concerns about the environmental part. So I see that as a good. Unfortunately, just last month, as I mentioned, our state legislature sort of tied the hands of local governments by severely limiting their powers when it comes to gas and oil activities. There's an important lesson to be learned from that, and I think it will resonate here in New York State. I've spoken with several of the people who were in the room when Pennsylvania's Act 13 was getting hammered out. And the gas industry, of course, was pushing for local preemption of county, township, or borough regulations. And while the legislature stopped short of giving them everything they wanted, it almost happened. Why? Because some cities and other municipalities had hastily, and in my opinion stupidly, passed unconstitutional regulations that in effect banned shale gas drilling. The can't do that in Pennsylvania. And then the industry used that as an example, saying, this is what happens when you leave it in the hands of people who have knee-jerk reactions, or don't know the law, or think they're trying to, prove a point. It'll get overturned in court. It already started to, and with Act 13, it pretty much is a done deal now. So as I say, the industry lobbyists argued if the legislature empowers local governments, the result will be a legal Donnybrook. And that was not a good outcome in the eyes of really anyone in Harrisburg. Going to ugly, I'd really say those who might have been inclined to serve in local government, the flip side of the fact we've attracted some others who also bring things to the table, become disillusioned, they're feeling powerless, a lot of them because of the state's power grab on Act 13 on local preemption. And so we're concerned in the long run it's going to be hard to attract qualified and conscientious people to public service. They're going to say, well, the state's running this, what can we do locally? Our hands are tied. Human services, only really the good impact I could find is part of Act 13, the revenue, first of all, gets paid to the state, they take a whole lot off the top, then they start sending it back, and we will get a portion of that for some of our human service programs, but not much. We will get portions of it back with very few strings attached, and that's good. Our little county, we have an annual budget of about $7 million. We will get, we're thinking between $700,000 and $800,000 just to the county government alone. The municipalities, the townships mostly, are going to get about $1.3 million. That's from 2011 drilling under this law. It's all retroactive. It'll be less for 2012, obviously, because it's based on the number of wells and the production, and that's down, and it will be down this year. Bad, I'd say because workers from out of state lack the community supports that local residents rely on, they are more likely to fall directly into some of our county programs. Because their support systems and families and such are distant, the solutions to their issues can involve transportation, and all these become burdens for local counties. The out-of-state workers include at least a nominally higher percentage of individuals with drug and alcohol or mental health problems and family issues that require some intervention. And again, that falls back on the county. Has not been a big issue where I live, but it has in Bradford County. On criminal justice, like I say, it's a stretch to find a good impact. I'd say at least some of the lawbreakers that work for the gas companies can pay their own lawyers. They don't have any trouble paying their fines, so we don't have to put them in the public defender's caseload. He has enough to do. Speaking of Bradford County, they've had major increases in crimes, especially DUIs. They've had about a 35% increase in motor vehicle crashes. A lot of that's from population increase. If you look at the population's gone up, it's probably about proportional to the incidence of crime and crashes, so I wouldn't really attribute it to gas per se, I just attribute it to higher population. And the county jail, which was only recently expanded, is full again. Ripple effects include prisoner transport, court costs, and more police patrols. Ugly, well, in Tioga County there was a murder case in which both the victim and the killer were out-of-state gas workers. The county was stuck paying all the trial costs, including expert witnesses. That's just how the system works. Not much on emergency services. I just would say that some companies have donated money to support volunteer fire and ambulance services, and we found that all of them are eager to cooperate with our emergency service providers and our countywide staff. Bad, every time a gas well is drilled or a gathering line laid, our county has to update its emergency services plan. We have like 2 staffers, and they're really overwhelmed. There are added training demands for our volunteers to deal with the unique nature of gas industry emergencies. It's asking a lot of volunteers who are already pretty burnt out by chicken barbecues and the fact that the younger people are not coming in and joining the fire department. These guys are hanging into their 60s and 70s just because nobody will step in. And a higher call volume has forced some increases in 911 emergency dispatch staffing. For ugly, I'd say with the lack of consistent well site addressing, which we're working on, but I mean, we're very, very remote. We're about 55% state forest land where I live. Without the addressing nailed down and with an incomplete wireless build out in some of the remote areas, there have been problems determining the location of well site emergencies. The influx of gas workers has been a big boost to the hospitality industry. I have a high school classmate who put in a 20-unit motel, and this is in Coudersport, where we, in Potter County, we haven't really had much activity. He's expanded it to about 50, he's put up 6 rental cabins, and he's doing very well. At the same time, the no vacancy phenomenon means that gas workers are displacing traditional tourists who would also be visiting our local attractions and spending money with some of our specialty shops. I know in Tioga County, truck traffic and congestion has taken a toll on the tourist business in the Pennsylvania Grand Canyon region. My home, Potter County, is marketed as God's country. If you've been there, you've probably seen the signs at all the gateways. It's mainly because of our abundant natural resources. We're known for hunting, fishing, camping, hiking. While our tourism has already been struggling because of high gas prices and other factors, and as the forests are cleared and the pipelines laid, compressor stations built, motels being filled with itinerant gas workers, we're concerned that our God's country label could be somewhat of a harder sell. There's a brushy plateau in Potter County. I don't know if anyone's been there, but it's where 3 of the nation's major river systems, the Allegheny, Ohio, the Susquehanna, and the Genesee, can all trace their origins. We call this the Triple Divide. Understandably, that area was treated with reverence by the Native Americans, as if it was the source from which all life sprung. For many of us who grew up there, Potter County, God's country, is more than a tourist slogan. It has spiritual significance. When it comes to gas drilling, the word I hear most often from people is overwhelmed. I have this little Yahoo tickler on my email. Every time the word Marcellus comes up, it shoots me an email to check out this link. I had 11 of them this morning when I got out of bed, and when I checked here on a break, there's 6 more. So you talk about overwhelmed. And a lot of them have 8, 9, 10 stories attached to them, and most of them are pretty interesting. We're operating now, this is at least my opinion from this point forward, an environment that, in the word of Donald Rumsfeld, contains a lot of known unknowns. The hard numbers are yet to come in. To get some answers now, I cannot stress enough the importance of checking with credible people in areas where the shale gas industry is more mature to get a better idea of what to expect. Dr. Kelsey from Penn State has been doing that. His advice is, public officials would be wise to focus on the future after the boom and not just the present. Try to look at it in the long term. Focus needs to be on development in its entirety and not just well sites. There are countless ripple effects. Shale gas is a means to improve the local economy, but it is not an end in itself. It will come to an end. It may be in the future decades, but don't put all your eggs in one basket. Now, more than ever, is a time for public engagement in meetings, social media, collaboration, constant communication to control our own destiny to the extent that we can, and determine how the gas industry fits into a community's long-range plans. And they already stole my thunder on this guy. He's a popular guy today. I'd wager at least a few of you know that is the old 60s sitcom star Jed Clampett from the Beverly Hillbillies. As you may recall, I thought about singing my chicken out. As you may recall, he barely kept his family fed. And then one day he was shooting for some food. Up from the ground came a bubbling crude. Well, the first thing you know, old Jed was a millionaire. And the kinfolk said, "Jed, move away from there." Now let's stop right there. Think about that. Was the community where Jed Clampett lived so unpleasant that the first thing he and his kinfolks could think of was getting out of there? It goes back to what Dr. Kelsey said about recognizing the bigger picture, fitting this newfound wealth that shale gas can bring into a broader plan to develop communities and protect them so they remain the kind of places where people want to stay. After all, we don't want Jed Clampett depositing all of his money with Milburn Drysdale. Well, it would be much more helpful to his community if he'd stick it in his hometown bank. We sure could use more Jed Clampetts in Potter County. We've had families moving out in droves. far too many of our young people, especially those with the ambition to get somewhere in life, have lost hope and left Coppersport and left Potter County. In our church, as I say, I'm 57 years old. I'm the second youngest member of our church's congregation. Businesses have been scaling back, shutting down, and those of us who have stayed put are aging. Now on the horizon is an industry that promises economic revitalization for decades. But I've not met one local, even those who are extremely bullish on natural gas, who's willing to tolerate any sacrifice of our natural environment in pursuit of this opportunity. And I do not share the opinion I occasionally hear, even from, as I said, my close friends, that we have to choose one over the other. We should not be so quick to rush to judgment. Respect for those whose knowledge or priorities are different is sorely lacking. And when that happens, we open ourselves up to poor public policy. There's one proven way to address that, and it's a model that seems to be consistently effective, at least in the counties I'm familiar with, the natural gas task force concept. Ours really took on a life of its own and became quite well respected. Why? Two reasons: diversity and credibility. Our members included everyone from the CEO of Potter County's most active shale gas drilling company to some Pennsylvania state officers of Trout Unlimited. We got them all at the same table. We encouraged the most vocal opponents of gas drilling and its most fervent supporters to join us. And eventually a structure evolved to divide the work into 5 critical areas. Employment, job training, and industry technical issues was the first. The more active members all agreed to get on one or more of these committees, and they met separately outside of our larger task force, and then they would report issues and results and recommendations for our larger group meetings. Water quality and environmental protection. That's how we got our Triple Divide Watershed Coalition. That's how the Water Dogs got started. Public safety and emergency services. That forged the relationships that our fire departments and our emergency services staff needed with the industry. Community planning, township, and borough issues. And the most important one, in my opinion, it's probably because I chaired it, was public education. All these groups identified goals, developed tasks, and over the course of about 2 years, they pretty much accomplished what they set out to do. Now our task force, just a few weeks ago, has evolved into a natural gas resource center. A major focal point is a professional website that will become a one-stop shop for public and general information, business connections, job training, employment opportunities, and community resources. Links will include reliable websites, and I stress the word reliable, educational resources, industry news, and more. A steering committee, basically the more active members of our task force, are now sitting together to make sure that this resource center continues to oversee those 5 core missions that we identified a couple of years ago. And then a shared staff at the center ensures professionalism and responsiveness. We had to piece this thing together with a few tax dollars and a lot of volunteer hours and a lot of arm twisting, and it's about 5 different public agencies involved. No industry money. We did get offers to do it, and they are helping out in terms of, giving us information for the website and stuff. So the stage is set. As I said, now's the time for responsible citizen advocacy based on facts, not half-truths, not emotions. We need to keep the credibility bar high. There's too much at stake for all of us, from the sentinels of Potter County's Triple Divide to a nation that's so desperately in need of energy independence to settle for anything less. With that, I'll thank you for hanging in with me. From my understanding that the whole panel will field questions. My contact information is on there. Dr. Kelsey's is on there. And the website for the Natural Gas Resource Center is a good one to write down. That's website sort of in the beta stage right now, but we do expect it to kind of be the repositories. More and more people gravitate to using the internet and expecting things at their fingertips, or at least through a phone call. That's where they'll go. They won't wait a month for our task force meetings, or, as I say, the 15, 20, 25 emails that are in their inbox. So thank you.